Right. So before continuing on with the next section of the second machine age, automation, let me share with you an interesting video clips which sort of encapsulates, which summarizes the content which we talked about offshoring. Right. So let me share that with you so that the concept becomes clearer to you.
Offshoring. Offshoring is when a business relocates its production or service from one country to another. This usually refers to business companies, although state governments may also employ offshoring. Offshoring of products involves the relocation of physical manufacturing process to a lower cost destination. This is called product offshoring. Examples of such offshoring include the production of goods in China or Vietnam. A major incentive for product offshoring arrived when the North American Free Trade Agreement made it easier for manufacturers to shift production facilities from the US to Mexico. This trend later shifted to China, which offered cheap prices to very low wage rates, cheap land, few environmental regulations, and huge economies of scale. Services such as finance and accounting, IT, application development are also known for offshoring. This is called service offshoring. One of the countries to benefit from this was India, as it has had a large pool of English-speaking people and technically proficient manpower. Because of inflation, high domestic interest rates, robust economic growth, and increased IT offshoring, the Indian IT sector has witnessed a significant wage growth. Offshoring through free trade is seen as a benefit for both the origin and destination country by lower cost of goods and services to the origin country and providing jobs to the destination country. Therefore, both sides should see an increase in GDP. And the total number of jobs increases in both countries since those workers in the origin country that lost their job can move to higher value jobs in which their country has a comparative advantage. There are pros and cons to offshoring. One of the pros is cost differentials. One of the reasons that companies are moving their operations overseas is the lower labor costs. Compared to paying employees in the United States, it is more affordable to pay foreign workers. Costs of certain materials, such as raw materials, are also cheaper, especially if they are produced in the country where a company is offshoring jobs. Secondly, it provides jobs in the developing nations. Most companies in highly developed countries move some of their operations to less developed countries with excessive unemployment rates. By offering more jobs to the locals, the situation and economy of the developing nations are sure to improve. Thirdly, they improve business operations. Offshoring to countries with different time zones will enable companies to provide customer support 24/7 and cater consumers in other parts of the world. There are also disadvantages to offshoring. Offshoring incur costs in certain aspects. A company may be able to save money from lower wages, but they might spend more in training and supervising overseas employees. In the end, the cost differential might not be as pronounced or one that can be clearly felt by the pocket. Products may be cheaper to produce abroad, but the cost of shipping them may not be as cheap. Secondly, problems with quality control. In the case of manufacturing firm, for example, ensuring that the product is built according to the company's standards may not be as easy as when the item is produced locally. It would be hard to keep an eye on the overall operation. Even if there are guidelines provided, barriers pertaining to language, culture, and overseas supply chains might still affect quality control. Thirdly, affects domestic employment rates. Because majority of jobs are sent offshore, very few would be made available to the locals, increasing unemployment rates. This can cripple the economy. This can also hurt the public image of the company, especially when use of labor abuse, environmental damage, and child labor will be associated with the firm.
Stop.
Right. So when I stopped right when the guy in the video said stop, right? Okay. So you saw a recapturing of what we so far discussed regarding offshoring, how it gives rise to certain advantages as well as disadvantages on the point of the enterprise, right? So you also can make extra readings in this regard and improve your knowledge with regards to this concept of offshoring, right? Now we are moving to the second subtopic, the second machine age, right? The second machine age. Like offshoring, automation is by no means new, right? So in the second machine age, what we mostly discuss about is this concept of automation, right? So this is what is expected to drive the second machine age mostly, right? So the quest to automate simple human tasks has occupied scientists and engineers for centuries. Today, we find information processing infrastructures of increasing complexity becoming programmed and available as modules that handle entire processes from order taking to fulfillment, inventory, and customer support. Now, the need to automate simple tasks has become a focal point for engineers and scientists for over a long period of time now. It is not something that just became popular all of a sudden. There have been attempts made all throughout the history at different instances to automate human tasks, to make lives easier simply by automating certain tasks, right? So now, for example, by the latter part of the 19th century, machines were being used to automate the tabulation of data gathered by certain businesses, industries, for example, in like census, calculation of census, right, in the United States especially. So when it came to the 1920s, automated switchboards controlled many of the incoming and outgoing calls in the certain companies of the United States, right? In the 1960s, right, it was made a prediction that computers would replace organizational functions that are programmable, which meant that humans had to handle the non-programmable tasks, especially those tasks that involved interpersonal communication and judgment were, there was a prediction that those kinds of tasks will be only dedicated for humans, whereas programmable kind of tasks would be taken over by machines or they will be automated. So that is very true when it comes to the present, right? In the present, we actually experience it. We find information processing infrastructures that are very complex and they are being programmed and they are available as modules that facilitate the handling of complete processes from order taking to fulfillment, inventory, and even providing customer support. Right? These tasks can all become increasingly programmable in the modern context. Right? But in the earlier world, in the earlier instances of development, these kinds of functions required a lot of intervention by humans. But increasingly, humans are being replaced in these kinds of areas. Right? So in the present world also, there are many instances where, for example, warehouses in like Amazon, right? They have robots who are controlling the handling in and the moving around and the issuing of inventory, right? Without even us knowing, a lot of instances, examples are there where machines have replaced the jobs of the people, humans like you and me. So if we take, for example, a simple process of a car wash, right? There are so many instances in the world where maybe not in Sri Lanka, we don't see that so much, but there have been, I will show you an example video also on this, where a simple car wash from beginning to end is being fully automated, right? Even like complex processes can be, that can be programmed, can be fully automated using machines, using robots, using machine language, basically, right? So, so that there is zero human intervention in between. So let me share this interesting video with you so that you see how this really happens.
Almost any process can become automated. It can save time and money to automate an industrial process. It also helps eliminate human error. Another upside is that the use of automation creates many high-paying careers for maintenance workers, engineers, and programmers. A simple everyday example of automation would be an ordinary pull-in and park automatic car wash. If we break it down step by step, it should help you understand how automation works. Once you select your wash, that input will run a certain program on the controller. Next, you drive forward until a sensor is flagged, starting the wash cycle, and another sensor tells the driver when to stop. From there, the wash will continue through the cycle that the controller is running. In a typical car wash, the nozzle spraying the water and chemicals will travel alongside a vehicle, and a sensor will detect when it is past the vehicle. This saves time, water, and chemicals by controlling when the nozzles spray, as well as serves as an input to advance to the next step of the wash. Once the car is sprayed, the program tells the wash to spray the next chemical. This is done by the controller turning on and off each pump as it's needed. The controller then runs through the rest of the cycle and wash that was selected in the beginning. Once all steps have been completed, the driver will be signaled to pull out of the wash. Essentially, the only human intervention in the process is the driver selecting what wash they want. Industrial automation works exactly the same way. Each industrial process needs to be started by some sort of input. That input can be a sensor, push button, switch, among many other possibilities. Typically, a person will start the process with one of these input devices, or it could be a sensor that detects an object automatically. Those inputs will go to a PLC, which will then make decisions based on how it was programmed.
Right. So in that example, you saw how a simple car wash can be automated, right? So the entire service that is provided by a service station can be automated with zero human intervention for washing the car, for cleaning it. Now when throughout the entire process, different sorts of people get involved in the process, now, from making the the entry and the booking and all those things. So all of those things can be done with the intervention of automation processes, right? But now an interesting observation that you would have made in this scenario is, now while certain jobs like customer service support, taking of bookings and things, and keeping tab of appointments and all those things, and also washing the car, manual labor, right, things like that, while some of these jobs can get fully replaced, also these kinds of processes can give increased opportunities to new forms of jobs and make certain types of jobs more important than the others in the future. Now, what sort of such jobs can you think of? For example, now, in this case, we observe a lot of robotics, a lot of machinery and equipment are being involved in this process of automations, right? So types of jobs like machine operators, right? Maintenance work, right? And engineers, programmers who are handling the back end of the systems and all that, and engineers who are designing these intricate systems, and machine operators and maintenance guys who are making sure that the operations, the robots or the machines are operating properly. So these are the kinds of jobs that will become more important and will get paid highly in these kinds of settings. Instead, a set of careers like this, floor workers and customer service agents and things like that, they will get eliminated, right? So you see how the concepts of the second machine age or these automation processes are changing the nature of labor, the nature of work, essentially, right? So let me share the slides again. So moving on, thus far, as the machines eliminated some jobs, they created others, right? Like I mentioned, they have created others. So I have included a video clip on the LMS. You can have a look at that. An interesting TED talk, right? TEDx talk, actually. A TEDx talk on the jobs of future and how we can prepare for them, how the entire landscape of jobs have changed. Just a 15-minute length video. You can watch them leisurely. It's quite interesting how the speaker talks about how the traditional way of we look at jobs have fully changed, right? And what kind of jobs will we as people will have to be equipped for in the future. So I will put the link on the LMS. Please do watch it when you have time, right? However, it is possible that we are now entering a new era of automation in which the rate of previously human performed work now done by machines may outpace the rate at which these machines create new jobs. Now, the issue here is, while some of the jobs can be eliminated due to automation, while some jobs can be created due to automation, the issue is the rate at which the machines take over the jobs of people will be higher than the rate at which these machines will create new jobs. So that is the conundrum that we have to deal with in the present, and of course in the future increasingly. A 2015 McKinsey company study indicates that as many as 45% of the activities individuals are paid to perform can be automated by adopting currently demonstrated technologies. So if we correctly adopt the technologies that we are being presented with, as many as 45% of the activities of individuals can be automated in the future, according to a 2015 report by McKinsey. So imagine the issue here, right? What will the future hold for us? And are we really prepared for that? That is the real question. And what kind of jobs are they talking about? What kind of jobs or activities can be really replaced? So that is the question for us to think about, right? In the rest of the lecture also, I will show you a video by a talk actually made by one of the authors of this book of The Second Machine Age, Professor McCarthy, talking about what the second machine age means and what happens there and what happens to the job and what will the future look like, right? So the final point says, it is further argued that although computers have been transforming work, economics, and everyday life for several decades, right? Although there has been a transition or a change in the nature of work, in the nature of economics and the kind of economics that we know, and also our day-to-day life has been changing for several years now, we have finally reached a pivotal moment, a moment when we are grappling with the full force of digital technology. So we are at an age where we are actually trying to handle this full force thrusted in our direction by the digital technology. And we are trying to sort of sorry about the interruption. So we are trying to sort of struggle with all these technologies incoming, and they're trying to take over our jobs, and how best we can utilize them to automate processes, and also how to keep our jobs at the same moment, and how we can adapt to new jobs, and how we can improve our skill set so that we are more validated and we are more suitable for jobs of the future, right? So we are in a moment where we are constantly going through this struggle, right? So moving ahead, when examining what tasks computers perform better than humans and what tasks humans perform better than computers. Now, this is a question that we need to answer, right? So we say that some jobs can be replaced by machines, but also still some jobs will stay and some new jobs will emerge at the same time, right? So when examining what type of jobs or what types of tasks can computers perform better than humans, and for what tasks humans are better suited than computers, that is a question that we need to answer if we are to understand how much challenged we are in this era and what is that challenge. So how should we address that challenge? So we need to answer that question. So in order to answer, it is argued that computers have inherent advantages in tasks like role-based decision-making and simple pattern recognition, right? But digitization makes two kinds of tasks more valuable. What are the tasks? Complex communication and expert thinking, and prescribe that humans acquire the skills that enable them to take on jobs involving such tasks. So the prediction is that, or the idea is that in a digitized age, computers have more advantage over humans in tasks that involve role-based decision-making and simple pattern recognition, like taking orders, for instance, responding to certain queries by the customers that requires less judgment, like maintaining a warehouse, counting the stock, sometimes even controlling the warehouse process. And in the early example, like we saw in that situation of servicing the car, washing the car, actually, not rather servicing, washing the car. But even the process of servicing the car, it can be automated because the technologies have improved in such a way that they can even diagnose, pictures of certain parts of the human body and diagnose the ailments there, diagnose the issues. For example, AIs have been, or machine learning algorithms that we're talking about, right? In the automation, what we're talking about is this robotic process automation, and all that is enabled by algorithms that are written using machine language, right? So due to these algorithms, programs have been enabled, or artificial intelligence have been enabled, which are able to sort of do scans or analyze pictures of the human eye, for instance, and diagnose whether certain conditions are present with that person's eye, right? So that kind of learning is being constantly improving. So although we say that expert thinking and complex communications that humans are able to do will have more chance, these algorithms are also increasingly being trained to make judgments on their own as well. Although now it may not be at that kind of a developed stage, the future is predicted to be at that stage. Now, if we take the organizational pyramid, for instance, right? If we take the role of finance, for instance, tasks like, keeping accounting records, right? Accounting record keeping, invoicing, making payments, and things like that can be easily automated in the present context, right? So the kind of jobs you find at the bottom of the pyramid can easily be automated also. But when you go up higher along the pyramid, that kind of jobs, it is being widely accepted, are more difficult to replace by using this automation or artificial intelligence, or the robotics, for instance. For example, a highly skilled CEO, right? A highly skilled manager who oversees a lot of things, has a lot of expertise, industry experience, has their own intuition and judgment that is affected by things more than the variables that are, a part of the problem, right? Can factor in, for example, the human feelings, emotions, and empathy can be a part of the decision making of these people, but maybe not so much for machines or robots, right? So that is why when you climb higher and higher up in the employment hierarchy, that higher level positions have better security against this automation wave, so to speak, when compared with lower level tasks. But also, like I mentioned, what we have to keep in mind is increasingly these machines are being given the ability to learn and detect human emotions even, right? And to respond appropriately, right? So we don't know what the future holds. It's still a developing area, but the prediction is that most probably machines can be taught to think like humans and make judgments just like humans, right? It has come to the medical field, and also there have been research and tests going on in the education field, where, for example, answer scripts of students are being presented to a robot, and the robot can correctly evaluate the answer and provide a grade that is very similar to the grade provided by an actual human teacher, right? So therefore, the revolution is actually in the process of happening, right? Right. So although for the time being, it is regarded that the kind of rule-based decision making and simple pattern recognition kind of tasks can be taken care of by machines, as opposed to complex communications and expert thinking. Right. It is also contended that computers are in fact on the verge of surpassing humans at some tasks than that humans continue to dominate. Like I mentioned earlier, computers are and will, like we have the risk that machines or computers will surpass humans at certain tasks that humans can continue to dominate. And it has already happened, especially it is being predicted that in fields like finance and so on, for example, some careers will completely be obsolete in the future, right? Now, for instance, it is being predicted that in the field of finance, at least nearly over 70% of the functions and processes in the finance field can be done using a machine in the future, that they can be automated. For example, things like taxation, ledger postings, turnaround documents, bookkeeping, like I mentioned, right? So these kinds of tasks, if when I mention them, you have to be able to recognize that they are increasingly operational nature and tactical nature actions or tasks, right? So these kinds of tasks can be actually taken over by machines. Now, why? Because robotic process automation that we talked about earlier, for instance, what is it? It is actually software, that algorithms, this machine language, they are writing programs or software. So these are enterprise software. Now, what happens in process automations is that softwares come alive that have the ability to replace repetitive nature tasks, like I mentioned earlier, and that can be done, and also role-based tasks, right? Certain role-based decision making, and that can be applied across multiple systems and applications. And when we talk about robotic process automation, don't think that it's like walking and talking robots that we see in movies. True, that is also a part of that, right? But also robotic process automation largely refers to these kinds of software that have the ability of massively taking over the functions of humans, right? It's not just the chatbots, not simply just chatbots and walking robots that you see in movies. It is also part of that, but it's something a lot more than that, right? So in order to understand this concept, we also use the term softbots or software robots, in other words, right? Which are actually capable of carrying out repetitive tasks, right? So that may require rearranging the workflow of how usual humans handle it, but anyway, it has already become a reality. So in the finance field, in those fields I mentioned, tasks such as bookkeeping, handling the taxes, or even accounts receivables, payables, journal entries, budgeting, auditing even, right? Things that require certain role-based decision making, reporting, even advisory services, up to certain extent can be, according to the predictions, taken over by machines, right? Automation can happen, but higher level activities where a lot of cognition is involved, there will be some sort of difficulty in, automating these areas, right? So moving ahead, McCarthy and Brynjolfsson support this argument through the coming of age of the autonomous automobile, self-driving cars, right? For example, I mean, there are so many instances where the concept of self-driving cars is being tested by countries all over the world, right? Now, do make a search of this Waymo, right? Waymo self-driving car, what it can do, and also there are so many other varieties. So the self-driving autonomous automobiles and the emergence of iPhone Siri, right? If you're a holder of iPhone, or even if you're not, you may have heard of Siri, that virtual assistant you get with the phone, right? They are being predicted as early indicators of the eventuality that machines can increasingly take over humans. So I would like you to look at this interesting video clip by McCarthy. Actually, this McCarthy and Brynjolfsson are the authors of the book, The Second Machine Age. So here, I will show you what McCarthy, the author of the book itself, talks about the machine age and the future.
Technology has been racing ahead, but many people have not been keeping up with that. There's kind of a dirty secret in economics that not many people recognize because it hasn't been so important before, and that is that while technology can grow the economic pie and really is what some economists jokingly say is the only free lunch that we believe in, there is no economic law that says that everyone's going to benefit from those technological gains. It's entirely possible that some people will be made worse off. You've heard of the buggy whip manufacturers that were put out of business when Henry Ford introduced the automobile. Well, sure, there are some people who may be made worse off. It turns out that the size of that group can be almost arbitrarily large. It could be 50% or more of people who don't share in those benefits. And the data suggests that in the past 10, 15 years, that's been the pattern that's been emerging, is that technology has been making the pie bigger, but most of those benefits have been accruing to a relatively small group. Maybe 60 to 70% of them have been accruing to about 1% of the people in the past decade or so. And a lot of that, well, there are many forces at work, a lot of it has to do with the nature of technology. To give you an example, consider a simple application like tax preparation. So TurboTax can do your taxes. Many of you probably use TurboTax. I do. It's a simple piece of software that has codified that process and reduced it to a basic set of steps, digitized it. And once it's become digitized, guess what? You can make a copy of it. You can make 10 copies of it. You can make 100 million copies of it. And the marginal cost of that is very, very low. Anything that's digital can be reproduced at nearly zero cost. What's more, each copy is virtually identical to the original, and it can be transmitted almost instantaneously anywhere on the planet. As Hal writes in his book, Information Rules, which you should all read if you haven't already, these characteristics of free perfect, and instant are not common for most other goods and services, to say the least, and they lead to sometimes some unusual economics. Some of those economics are what we call winner-take-all markets, because if someone has made a tax preparation program, you don't necessarily want to go out and buy the 100th best or the 1,000th best or the 10,000th best program. You want to buy probably the best one you can find. Maybe there's some room for a small amount of differentiation if people have slightly different kinds of needs. And so a very small group, maybe one, will win the dominant share of the market. Sticking with tax preparation, that means that the people at Intuit have done very, very well. There's some billionaires there now. All of us as consumers have done well, because for $39 we can get tax preparation, and we have a lot of consumer surplus and benefits, ease of use that we wouldn't have had otherwise. But there are a bunch of people in the tax preparation business at H&R Block and elsewhere that may have had college education, may have had some skills that they've invested a long time in, and now they're not really adding a lot of value anymore. What they do isn't really all that useful to most of the rest of us. And as a result, the ranks of people who say their job is tax preparation has fallen dramatically over the past 5 or 6 years. And it's, of course, not because taxes have gotten so much easier. It's because technology can now do that job. Now, that's just one example, but it's in many ways a microcosm of what's happening in many other industries, where you can codify more and more processes and reduce them into a digital form and then replicate them. Mark Andreessen has famously said that software is eating the world. And he's got a point that this digitization is at the core of more and more industries. Not just the traditional software industries, but of course music and media, manufacturing, finance, retailing. In fact, it's hard to think of an industry that's not affected, with the possible exception of our industry, education, which I think is next in line for that kind of revolution. And that means that the same kind of, not just technology, but the same kind of economics is coming to more and more industries. A number of economists, including our colleague David Otter and others at MIT, have looked at what's happened to what they call the skill content of jobs. If you take the overall occupations in the economy and look at the underlying skills required to do them, what you find is that those jobs that involve routine information processing tasks, like for instance tax preparation, but also travel agents, bookkeepers, secretaries, those jobs have been the ones that have shrunk the most over the past decade, because automation has affected those tasks the most. Now,
right. So that was one of the authors of the book, The Second Machine Age. You can freely actually Google his speech. Some interesting talks there he has done regarding the second machine age and their basis for writing this book. So you saw how he explains the revolution that happens in the second machine age, and also this David Otter, the colleague of his that he mentioned about. One of the TED Talks that I've included on the LMS is actually done by Professor Otter about the nature of the change in jobs and the nature of skills that we will require in order to be equipped for those jobs. Please do watch it because all these are very prominent researchers in this area of the second machine age and this robotics and automation and all these things. They have done extensive research into this area. So do listen to their talks and you will be able to learn a lot about what is happening around us. All right. So coming back to our lecture, moving forward, they suggest, who are they? Now, the authors of this book that we talked about, right? McCarthy and Brynjolfsson, suggest that key building blocks are already in place for digital technologies to be as important and transformational to society as the steam engine, right? Already the requirements of the prerequisite from the technological end that is required for this automation to be realized are already there in the society, right? In the second machine age, it is argued that we are headed into an era that won't just be different, it will be better because we'll be able to increase both the variety and the volume of our consumption. Now, this is also an interesting observation. It is argued that during this second machine age, we are headed to an era that will be better in terms of consumption as consumers' point of view, because we will be able to increase our variety of consumption. That means the different types in which we consume a product or service, but also we will be able to increase the volume or the amount of our consumption, right? It does not simply mean that we will consume more, but consume differently. In addition to the idea that we will be able to consume more, we have to also concentrate on the fact that we will be able to consume from many different ways, right? For example, we consume information from books and friends, entertainment from superstars and amateurs, expertise from teachers and doctors, and countless other things that are not made of atoms. That means there are so many even digital sources that are present in the modern era where we can consume information, we can consume services from. Right? So just like we can consume information using a book and even using friends, right? We can like get entertained by superstars, even in amateurs, even like less experienced people can deliver entertainment, right? Expert opinion can be taken by a teacher and even a doctor. So many different ways of consumption, but also added to these digital platforms have increased benefits. Now, for consuming information, for example, we can use a lot of e-resources. There are so many digital resources available for us to consume from, right? So likewise, the way our consumption happens in the future will also greatly be different, right? In this view, technology can bring us more choice and even freedom, right? So, for example, now if we just go on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, right? Think about how much we can indulge ourselves in terms of consuming, right? We can watch a concert happening over in Korea or even in the US by being here in Sri Lanka. That can be from famous artists like, I don't know, J-Lo or Jennifer Lopez, or even, even K-pop, right? If you're a fan of K-pop, right? We are able to consume it from right being here. And there are so many different platforms through which we can consume as well as different varieties. There are so many covers of this music done, right? So many new artists coming to the industry, and not just superstars. These new artists and amateurs and inexperienced people performing, playing instruments, singing, right? So likewise, the way we can consume is also have become very much diverse, right? There are so many opportunities for us to consume from. There are this whole new level of influencers, right, happening over TikTok and Instagram and so on. So like so many different sources from which we can seek for information as well, and so many sources from which we can get educated, right? So many ways for us to consume. In this view, that is why we say that technology can bring us more choice, right? Not just limited choices. We can choose from whom do we choose to seek information, from whom do we seek to get entertained, from whom do we seek opinion. Even if we take the simplest case of buying something, there's a lot of choice for us online, right? If we go on AliExpress or if we go on Daraz, there's a lot of choice for us to consume from which supplier are we going to buy. It's not just one or two, there are hundreds, there are thousands, right? So it gives us more choice and gives us more freedom to consume from whoever or whatever we want. In this, while it is noted that as digital computing leads to increased automation, there will be at least somewhat have-nots as well. So not only positives, there can always be, like there are two sides of the coin, there can be downsides, there can be disadvantages of automation as well. So obviously, technological progress is going to leave behind some people. We talked about those careers. We talked about what kind of people will be affected due to this automation, what kind of jobs will be replaced. Perhaps even a lot of people can be left behind because of automation as automation races ahead. For example, there's never been a better time to be a worker with special skills or the right education, because these people can use technology to create and capture value. So this is now high time for a person to be equipped with special skills and to be given the right education, because these skilled workers, these knowledge workers are the people that can use or that can create new technology to capture more and more value, that can bring out innovation, right? However, there's never been a worse time to be a worker with only ordinary skills and abilities to offer. So what kind of skills are we talking about here? Not just everyday skills that we always knew about. That's not the kind of skill that we have to be equipped with in order to face the modern world, because computers, robots, and other digital technologies are acquiring these skills and abilities at an extraordinary rate. For example, some like decades ago, it would have been great. A person who can calculate a sum in his mind would have been a great skilled worker with so much value. අපි දැන් කියන මනෝමයෙන් ගණන් හදන්න පුළුවන් කෙනෙක් උදාහරණයකට, ඉක්මනින් calculations කරන්න පුළුවන් කෙනෙක් උදාහරණයකට, ගොඩක් skilled worker කෙනෙක් වීමේ හැකියාව තිබ්බා අතීතයේදී. Right? For people who are doing calculations. But today, does it have enough, does that skill have become a skill of value? Not really. There are so many programs that are able to do fast calculations. It's just a matter of feeding the right data, right? Even extraction of data, even to feed data, machines can be used in the present context, right? It has been happening over the past, right, for a long time now. And what skills are important for today is the real question for you and I to tackle. Whether we are equipped with the right skills to face the modern world and the future. So it's not just ordinary skills or abilities we need, right? Because those skills can be acquired or taught for machines as well. So we need to be able to specially skilled in order to face a digitized world. So what kind of skills would this require? A lot of problem solving skills, right? A lot of complex analytics, not just simple analytics, right? A lot of decision making skills involving a lot of different variables, right? So that kind of skill we need to be equipped with, right? Based on this, the future appears to be one where automation will increase at a previously unprecedented rate. පෙර කිසි දිනක නොවූ විරු ලෙස automation කියන මේ concept එක අනාගතයේදී ක්‍රමිකව, right? වැඩිවීමකට ලක් වෙන බවක් තමයි කියන්නේ. Consumers will experience increased choice, but many workers, with the exception of those who are particularly well positioned to thrive in the digital age, risk being rendered obsolete. Unless you are a worker who is able to face the digital work, if you are not going to be a part of a digital workforce in a digital world, then you are increasingly at a risk of being obsolete. That means you are increasingly at a risk of losing your job, right? The better machines that can substitute for human workers, the more likely it is that they'll drive down the wages of humans with similar skills. Then machines වලට humans ලව substitute කිරීමේ හැකියාව වැඩි වෙන්න මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? The more likely it is that they'll drive down the wages of humans with similar skills. When machines are increasingly taking over humans, another disadvantage is that it will gradually reduce the wage rates or salaries of human workers, right? Why? Because we can easily purchase a machine and get the work done. No need to have a human. So your wage rate gets decreased. The lesson from economics and business strategy is that you don't want to compete against close substitutes, especially if they have a cost advantage. This emphasis on special skills is of particular interest because many economists assume that the ability to harness the benefits of digital technologies is something predominantly available to highly skilled workers, right? So many of the economists, they assume that the ability that people have, when we consider people who have the ability to harness or to extract, to obtain the benefits of digital technologies, that ability is only present among highly skilled workers. So at least that is what economists think or assume, right? So upon examining the rates of substitution between skilled and unskilled labor and ensuing impacts on the relative productivity of different skill groups across different industry sectors, it has been suggested that sharing economy platforms have an impact on the work prospects of people across the occupation spectrum, from computer scientists and consultants to household cleaners and cab drivers. So, when we consider the rate of substitution between skilled and unskilled labor, right? And also when we consider the impact it can carry on the productivity levels of different industry sets as a result, right? One of the suggestions that have been brought forward within sharing economy platforms is that sharing economy platforms have some sort of an effect on the nature of work of people across a wide variety of or a range of occupations or jobs, right? So the sharing economy can have an effect on these different possible work prospects of people across many different occupations. So it can range from even high-end jobs like computer scientists and consultants to even low-skilled work such as house cleaners and even cab drivers, right? In this respect, just as offshoring may be occupation blind, so too may the labor impacts, both positive and negative, of the sharing economy. So just like offshoring was occupation blind, we saw not only manufacturing, even services can be outsourced. It can be offshore, even services can be offshore. Even high-skilled jobs and low-skilled jobs can be offshore, right? Depending on the nature of the service though, right? So it is occupation blind. Again, occupation එක මොකක්ද කියන එක වැදගත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ offshoring වලට යනකොට. ඒක high skilled, low skilled මොන වගේ එකක්ද කියන එක. Right? එතකොට labor impact එකත් මේ වගේම positive and negative වෙන්න පුළුවන් sharing economy එකක් ඇතුලේදී. Right? Labor impact also can be not very much dependent upon the type of labor within a sharing economy according to this explanation. So today finally we are going to look at the new digitally enabled workforce in this regard, right? The new digitally enabled workforce. So what does this account for? While offshoring and the rise of the second machine age continue to profoundly restructure the economy, right? මේ offshoring ගැන අපි කතා කරා, second machine age එකේ සිද්ධ වෙන automation ගැන අපි කතා කරා. එතකොට මේවා නිසා economy එක ආර්ථිකය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත වෙනවා නේ. Increasingly it becomes restructured. neither phenomenon fully captures the changing nature of work in the 21st century. But those concepts of offshoring and second machine age alone are not enough to explain the differences that are being effectuated or being operationalized in the nature of work in the modern context, right? Beyond the fact that businesses are no longer restricted to hiring people in their geographic vicinity, right? That means we know it has been clearly established that we are no longer restricted to hiring people depending on the geographical area, right? There is a lot of freedom for us to source employment from all around the world without being worrying about where the people or the workers or even the customers are situated or where they are residing. And in a growing number of instances can opt to program tasks that once required human workers. Also, we cannot forget the fact that a lot of work that can be done by humans can be done by machines, because that work can be translated into programs or softwares. Then the present landscape of labor is also marked by myriad other notable changes. Also, the nature of labor can be shaped by a lot of other changes in the modern context, right? So what kind of things directly affect this labor in the labor landscape in the modern world? These include proliferation of marketplaces, the emergence of new generalists, the increased immediacy of labor supply, the emergence of task economies, and the rise of invisible work. Now, these are some of the interest areas that we can think of when we are talking about the changes that are happening in the modern world because of this digitalization, right? So one is the rapid increase of the marketplaces, right? The number of marketplaces that we can operate in, that we can serve in, are becoming increasing in the modern world. And also the concept of generalists, we are yet to discuss that. I will explain to you what the concept of generalists means and how it has operationalized in the economy. And the immediacy of labor supply. Now, the nature of work, the nature of labor has become increasingly, smaller units of work can be observed, granular forms of work can be observed. And task economies have emerged, as well as invisible work, which I will explain in detail to you in our next session. So I hope today's session was clear to you. I hope the concepts were clear to you. So we discussed some interesting concepts today in the modern economic, which is influenced by digitalization. We talked about offshoring. We talked about the second machine age. And we are next going to talk about the new digitally enabled workforce in the next session with some more interesting concepts and ideas that I'm excited to share with you. All right, then, for today, let's wind up the class, and do make sure that you watch those videos that I have uploaded, made available on the LMS. Some interesting TED and TEDx talks are available there for your knowledge. Right, then with that, let's call it a day. So thank you very much for your participation, and stay safe, everyone.